I knew, and this is the thing, like it freaks me out a little bit to think that from as early as 7 years old, when I was 7 years old, I remember starting to understand that something was different, that all of these aspirations that people had to live life in a certain way was not the same for me. That, you know, when people play with certain toys and do certain things, and, you know, boys are expected to be a certain way, I really started to understand that there was something that was different. I never viewed it as something wrong, nor did any of my family, and I think, again, I must say I'm very lucky in that way. I don't think any of them also let me view it as something wrong. There were other things that I got into along the way, which, you know, they've had conversations with me about, but not so much who I am or what I was in my being. I think when I started working, and I started my career actually in this very company like 18 years ago, when I was 17 years old, as a trainee, and a trainee copywriter. And I think that was sort of the first time, being 17 in a world full of adults who were functioning in a very much of a different way, I felt at ease to be more of who I was on the inside. And I think it was as early as that when I really started expressing myself in the ways that I wanted to, or really, you know, learning more about myself, experiencing different forms of attraction, being in different types of relationships, understanding myself in relation to so many other things that was going on. A lot of that was happening between, like, I think 17 and 25, because I think by around 25, I had a more rounded, grounded idea of who I was, where attraction truly lay at. I moved out of home quite early, and again, not because there were issues. My family cried on the times that I have moved out of the house, because, you know, we're very closely knit and we're very loving to one another. So it was difficult, but I really wanted to experience life in that way. I wanted to be able to do my own thing and to be my own person. So I moved out when I turned 21. And my mom let me move out. She didn't have to, she could have kicked up a fuss, but she really let me move out. And I made a lot of mistakes at that time, and then I had to move back home. And then much later on, when I was properly ready for it, I moved out because I realized I needed my own space. I needed to find myself outside of the construct of the home I had grown up in, because within that space, I would always be that child. And I think even to date, I'm 35 now, going on 36, even to date, my ability to go to my house, to be with my mother and my family, and to turn into that child in that context has remained possible and able because of that move out. Because I think whether you're struggling with identity or not, I think having your own space is very important, because learning who you are outside of the context of your family is really important. Because otherwise, you know, you never really question yourself. You never really get into the important stuff of figuring out, do I really like this food, or has this been the thing that has been put in front of me my whole life and I'm just eating it because my taste buds are used to it? Or do I actually prefer something else? Then you learn to cook, then you learn to clean, then you learn all of these things, and you're like, oh, I really like arranging stuff in a certain way. And then you learn that outside of the wants and needs of family, who is constantly like, why don't you settle down? Why don't you look at this? Why aren't you doing this one? You actually start asking yourself those questions, and the answers are life altering. And those same principles and procedures matter when dealing with your sexuality, because it's a list of questions. It's very much like am I this way? Do I need to do this because this is what I have seen happen in my family for generations? Or now that I'm alone, can I actually explore, what else I like, what else I want? It's important to find those things out, because there isn't a preconceived, written in stone kind of thing that we're all meant to follow. You also understand that physicality is only one aspect of attraction. What is the mentality that you're attracted to? What is the emotional side of things that you're attracted to? These are different things. So it's a whole bunch of experimenting and looking and searching and finding. And I don't think I had the conversation with my family until very late in my 20s. I think I would have been, closer to 30, or maybe even, I think I was about 30 at the time when I finally decided to sit down with my mom and have the conversation with saying, this is who I am, and this is how I feel. And it was interesting to see in that moment that they had questions, not questions that were about, Buddha, aren't you worried that you're going to hell? Not that sort of questions, but questions that were based on some beautiful things, I think. Questions like, can you explain to us how religion is telling us one thing, but you are telling us this other thing that you are feeling? Because now, even though you have said this about yourself, and even though I have had a view of people like this before, I look at you now and I see the same person, Brandon, and I still love you, and you're still my child. So, can you explain what religion is telling us and how you understand that? And that's rich conversation, and it's not coming from a place of rejection. It's coming from a place of wanting to understand. And I think love plays a key role in all of this. One of the things that I did, which I think a lot of people would do, which I think are signs to look out for, is we start expressing that darkness that we can't understand in whatever we do. Fortunately, many of us who go through such things have the arts to turn to. So, this comes out in the stuff that we write, in the stuff that we create. There are signs of it everywhere. The struggle is real, and the struggle is very visible through what we put out. But that being said, there's also a whole bunch of people who can't turn to art to let all of that stuff out. So you're probably experiencing it or expressing it in a lot of other ways. Because on an emotional spectrum, when you can't clearly go into a space of loving yourself, when you have that block inside of yourself that keeps you from loving yourself, it causes a frustration that then moves you into the other end of the spectrum, which is fueled by frustration but ends in anger. And that angry behavior sort of comes out in the way you treat people, the way you talk to people. I always think bullies are people that we need to take a closer look at, because there's heavy duty levels of non-self-love that is going on, and you have to really be able to break down what's going on there and ask them why. And if you're close to them, ask yourself why this is happening. Because anger chooses to express itself in crazy ass ways, and it's not always loud and destructive. Sometimes it's passive. Sometimes it's in the snide remarks that happen, or the way that you, like I said before, treat people, or the way you view a situation, your inability to trust someone else. All of these are signs that go into what happens when a person is struggling with their identity. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's their sexual identity that they're struggling with. It could be any form of identity. When you're coming to terms with yourself, these are things that you end up going through. There were many times when many people were trying to be nice to me, or trying to love me, or trying to understand me, And I viewed all of them in such a negative light because that was the negativeness that was inside me about myself. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on mental levels that I think, culturally speaking, we as Sri Lankans are afraid to get into or don't know how to get into yet, but we're getting there. Whatever the outcome, talk to your parents, because I feel like that's your first point of contact to anything, right? Through our parents, we learn trust. Through our parents, we learn responsibility, caring, maintaining loving relationships, all of that. So if you can't talk to your parents about shit, who can you really talk to, right? Because for better or for worse, you need to have that conversation. And I always say, we also judge our parents or the people from our parents' generation too harshly by believing that they will judge us or that they won't get it. And I think that's a little short-sighted on our part because they've seen more of the world than we have. They've been through more stuff than we have, and they have more insight. Sometimes that insight is a bit jaded. Sometimes that insight is a bit narrow, true. But what I find with parents is that even when they don't get it, even when they don't understand it, even when they don't understand you, chances are that they still love you. And I feel like that part of acceptance in that relationship you really need. And I think if I were to say anything to parents, it's that, stop imposing your way of life or your beliefs on your kids, because your child might quite well be someone completely different to who you think they are. Someone once said to me when we were discussing the concept of freedom, they said that true freedom is possible when you are able to be absolutely as you are, whilst allowing everyone around you that very same liberty to be absolutely as they are. And I thought that was a really profound statement when I heard it, and I spent a lot of time weighing the concept of freedom and what it meant. And I think that was the thing that really led me to wanting to really embrace myself fully, because that is what it is. There is freedom in that acceptance. There is a freedom, I think, like you can't imagine, because otherwise it just feels like you're walking through life with one hand tied behind your back, or your legs tied to each other and you're just like hopping along, or like you're carrying some kind of weight on you that is not tangible really, but it's just invading everything that is going on. And that frustration, as I was talking about before, which manifests itself into anger, you really start making everybody else's problem. So when you don't arrive at that position of freedom with yourself is when you get so caught up in what everyone else is doing, where everyone else is coming from, why did they do this thing, why did they say this thing, and like there's a level of paranoia that you're carrying with you, because everywhere you're at, even if someone smiles on the side, or like someone might be smiling across the room from you because they're flirting with you, but you just look at the smile across the room and you're like, oh God, why is this person smiling at me? What are they saying? What are they thinking of me? And all of that stuff is just like you not being able to just let it go. These things are very easy to say. The practice of it takes a little bit more effort, I think. But what I have discovered in acceptance is freedom. Absolutely freedom. The freedom to breathe, the freedom to not care about mundane, silly things that we invest our time in. That's the beauty of this life of discovery, that you always keep on discovering what's your capacity, what else can you do, where else can you go, who else can you be. And when you're open to that discovery, it is that feeling of freedom. And freedom is frightening only until you become friends with it. Because you realize that there's nothing that society can dictate to you, or that precedents can make you adapt to, that you don't want to, if you and you are solid.